Hi, I'm so glad you joined us today. I'm Colleen Abbott. I'm the program director for Eldon Leap, which is a 21st CCLC. I've been program director here for 7 years now, and also have a lot of other educational experience that I want to share with you today. And really talking today about leading through it all and how we as leaders have to be prepared mentally, physically, and in staff training to make sure that anything that comes our way, COVID, pandemic, or bus incident, or issues with personnel, that we have done everything we can to be ready and meet those challenges. And so without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen with you guys and we'll get this brought up here. So when we really think about leading through it all, and one of the things I absolutely love about Mosaic is just the variety of trainings that we have. And so this is really something to talk about all the way through. So as a program director, the things that I strive to do, but then also what do you do with your site coordinators when you look at all the way down to frontline staff, and then also other people in between. How do your bus drivers respond when there's an issue? And so really thinking about it from a variety of lenses. How well have you even prepared your parents when there may be a crisis? I don't have all the answers by any means, but just going to share some of the things that we've been working on, and hopefully today there's going to be some things that you're going to be able to reflect upon and just think about. And so when you think about really what is the plan, and what really got me thinking about this throughout, I said early on, probably about March, this was one of Michael Hyatt's books that they really looked at. Michael Hyatt's one of the guys that I follow, and I listen to a lot, read a lot of his stuff, listen to his podcasts, and this was one of the books that they were highlighting. You're It. Crisis management, crisis planning was not something that I cognitively thought, oh, I need to do this, but it was something that this book, and then moving into additional parts of this, has really helped me think, and really for us to work through both in our after school program and then also as a school district with just kind of issues and things that we need to continue to think about. So my goal for you today is to really, grab a great notebook, pen, pencil, and to really start thinking about it. And I've got the book here because this is a book that I've marked up and I've taken lots of notes on, and it requires you also to reflect. And so just making sure that you have something, or open up a Google Doc if that's the way that you keep notes, for things that you want to think about and plan. So basically we're going to go through 4 or 5 basic things. We're going to really think about what happens to us mentally, psychology wise, in a crisis, and then how can you prepare yourself? Is there any response besides fight, flight, or freeze? Can we really prepare ourselves for other things, or just is our gut going to react and that's the way it's going to be? So we're going to kind of talk about what some experts say about that. And then how do you reflect on your best practices, what you currently have in place, and then train or develop to move forward in that space? And then what do you need to do now to be the best leader that you can when you are really in need? When it is it, and you are the person, how can things we do today and moving forward, and even things that have happened because of COVID, what can we use there to make sure that we're in the best place that we can be? So that's that's our goal. And so when we first start thinking about crisis response, don't we wish we had a sign, just like on the highway when, my husband works for MoDOT. And so he puts out, the sign, mowers ahead or bump ahead, or all of these kind of things. And so much of the time, we don't get that opportunity. We don't know ahead of time that a crisis is coming. But we do know that things will happen, right? Inevitably, if you get in a car, something will happen. This time of the year where I live, it is deer season, right? And I just last week traveled a lot, had some in-person meetings that were happening again. And I just, pray, please don't let any of those big bucks, save them for the hunters, right? But it is one of those things of, but I know that's happening, so I'm going to be paying more attention. And really today is a part of it is just for us to pay attention to the things that we can control and we can look at. And so when a crisis happens, there's things that happen within our body that we kind of I'm going to go through and talk about. So first, it's going to be a thing that in this book, we'll talk about some of the authors, they talk about going to the basement and what that's about. Then we're going to talk a little bit about our own self-awareness and things that we know about ourselves that we can start to address today, so that is not another, something that's against us, something we're going to have trouble with later on because we weren't self-aware to begin with, or we knew this about ourselves, we chose not to address it, and it really became a major issue in a crisis. We're really going to look at the complexity of situations and how so many things depend on our perspectives of the issue. There are very few crises that come up. There are very few things that happen in after school or in any leadership position. You could talk about any kind of school system, and especially where we're at today, so many issues of complexity that we're facing. And you could pick out multiple different things from racial injustices and different situations that have been occurring across our country, to the election, to any of those things that you could consider a crisis, so to speak. And so something that we have responses that we have to have during those times, because really our goal is to minimize as much of that as we can so it doesn't truly become a crisis. So the first thing we're going to look at is going to the basement. Now, when you think about the basement, is this a great place to be? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Our basement is full of a pool room, and that's where the boys like ride their hoverboard and different random things like that, because it's the man cave and there's all kinds of space down there. But this is not a basement that we always think of as positive. So when we think about the levels of our brain and where things are happening, going to the basement, which one of the major brain researchers, Daniel Kahneman, he talks about the basement of the brain. And this is really back to things we talk about with our kids. This is where our survival circuits, not our judgment, not our real thinking, up here in the front of our brain, but it's really where we talk about the lizard brain with our kids, or that dinosaur brain. And it's also where we talk about amygdala hijack. And so this is really when, we talk about some of the different brain techniques, and when we're talking about our kids, we talk about, you don't want your amygdala to show, right? You want to have all of these things in place, and so it's not there. And so between some of our administrators, there's times that we can just be like, hey, it's this kind of day, like this is where I'm at, do not talk to me. I'm not going to be in a good thinking spot, because you've had multiple things that have come up that have really put you into that part of the brain where you are only reacting, right? You're only back into that primal, that survival circuit. And my body, my brain is really, we have definitely progressed as humans. And so my brain is going to do everything it can to protect itself. And that's where we're at. And so when we go into the basement, that's a natural thing that we don't control that. That is a part of what we do as humans. It is something that it's a survival technique that we have from way back when we were less intelligent, so to speak, or we were less, we just didn't have those things. So that's something that every mammal, for sure, and even they believe all the way back to, to dinosaurs, when they talk about those parts where they have a lot fewer choices, right, than we have as humans. And so most of the time when a crisis occurs, we are going to go to the basement. That in and of itself is not a bad thing. The real question is, how long are you going to stay there? And how do you get out of it? So we've all been there, and there's things that we can think of, like when you get to this point where, where that amygdala is showing, where you are just out of four because things are happening. Sometimes, a lot of times you will see me in the basement when my sons are we're at a store and they are just, a hot mess, and they haven't had enough sleep and I haven't had enough sleep. And usually, this happened a lot. My boys are really close together. And so when they were younger and one was in the cart and two were by the side, and it was like the worst nightmare of anything, right? And they have pushed every button, and you have some sweet soul that's like, oh, honey, you're going to miss this. And you want to be like, have got to be crazy, right? And those were things that our kids can sometimes send us to the basement, because they know our own personal kids, sometimes even the kids at our program, right? When things are just going wrong, multiple things that have happened, and you get all caught up in it as well. Sometimes a mad parent can really take us to the basement, because they can speak to us in a way that is just not positive and not okay. And so those are things that are there. A kid who knows, just like I said, who knows how to push those buttons, and things that sometimes they trigger old emotions as well, right? Sometimes even a crying baby. And there were times that, before I was a mom, before I had little kids, you would think, how could anyone hurt a little baby? But when you're sleep deprived and you're down to that part where you're on those survival circuits, there's times that crying baby can really put you in the basement. And again, going to the basement is not something that we always, that we control. It is that first instinct, that first reaction, because our body, our brain is trying to protect ourselves. The problem, though, becomes when we don't know how to get out of the basement. And so that's part of what, in the book You're It, that's part of what they talk about, is like, if we practice these things almost, or when we feel ourselves like, I am in the basement, how do I get out? What are strategies that I'm doing? That's things that we do today. Today we learn from a crying baby, from kids who aren't listening, from a mad parent. Like, we learn from those things that are not usually, life or death situations, but things that can get us to be in that part of our brain that are not always positive. How did I react, and how do I move forward? And we start that through self-awareness. And self-awareness is something that we talk about a lot within our program. It's something that if you work with Mason and do the DESA program, there is which is our social and emotional learning and some assessment tools that are there. There are adult lessons that go along. You see my poster in the back, the grade 8. I didn't just put that up there for today. I put that up there. It's a reminder for me to think through those grade 8 things that we do. And self-awareness is the first step in that. And I really appreciate the materials there within that if you're a grantee, if you work with your Mason folks, that's something that definitely that you can use. And those pieces of the adult lessons that help adults become more self-aware to then eventually help kids become more self-aware, those are the first points and the first practices that we have to get, that we have to practice and we have to get better at, skills that we need to develop in order for us to move our social emotional learning forward. And so this is just a poster that I had found online that I've used a lot of times that we have to think about. And it can be, this is a vulnerable place, right? So you don't necessarily just develop the self-awareness with random people or your brand new staff members all the time, right? Some of the time they do provide great feedback and you have to be willing to ask for it. You have to be somewhat vulnerable with those things. We have to do what we're doing today and self-reflect on the things that we do positively and then also things that we need to work on. And we have to know that. We also have to monitor our self-talk. And that is so important when we're in the basement, because if we allow every voice to be something that we listen to, we really can get into a place that's just not positive. And so the first voice that we always have to be talking about is ourselves. And any time that we're in this place, part of what we can do is saying, I can handle this, right? I know I can handle this. I practice this. And so part of this workshop was to help you think through and say, I've got this, right? And even though that sounds like something that, how do you know you've got it if it's, you're dealing with a bus wreck or you're dealing with a tornado, or you're dealing with, all these things like, no, I don't have control of that. But you have to know in your own self that you can handle things that are going to come your way. And you're going to handle all of these little things that come your way so that when something huge comes and you have a crisis, you're ready. And so questions that you can ask this time during self-awareness is what really pushes your buttons, right? And so those are things that a lot of times they have that ground. We're going to talk in a little bit about some of the, trauma, if you will, some of the things that we see or that have happened to us that we have to know about. Okay, so things that really, what pushes your buttons? I had a speech impediment as a kid. And so when I hear kids or adults like making fun of kids that have this, they just can't say their R's, they can't say their T's, that pushes a button for me, right? Because that was a part of something that I had in the past. And that is something that still today, I can't overreact to that, right? I'm self-aware to know that, I can't stand it when people, what I consider would be a victim of their parents' divorce, right? Because I'm in this place where I was like, no, you can do this, you can move past it. And that is true to a sense, but my experience was not their experience. And so I have to know that that's a button. I have to be self-aware enough about myself to not also say, well, this is my experience, so it should be your experience. And so much of the time, we have to make sure we do that. And that kind of goes with this next one about what do you fear? Like, you really have to be able to know and understand things that are really going to cause you to put you back in that spot. Okay. And so some of these fears are like real things that cause us, real trauma. They were things that were happened in the past to us. Okay. And then other times, like I have an irrational fear of being locked in a bathroom. Okay. It happened in our old outhouse at my church when I was 8 years old, out in the country. And I was pushing on the door. It's really a physics problem. But at the time, like I was trapped in there and I was, crying and screaming, and my mom came, and like, I can just imagine that. Right. Well, and then years later, like this has happened multiple times. Like I have broken down doors because I go back to that spot and I'm an 8-year-old in that old country outhouse. And it's one of those things that like, it makes zero sense. Right. But I'm still back in that spot. I have to know that. I have to be self-aware, and I've dealt with that. I've talked about that to the point where now my body doesn't have that same reaction. But if I were to go to, here in our school or at a location, I said, and something happens and the door won't open, I have to talk myself through, again, that self-talk, so that I don't break down the door and people think I'm absolutely insane, right? Because that's not normal. But most of the time we have something reasons why we're scared of something, even though it doesn't seem normal to most of us, right? And so those are things that we have to know about, and we have to be somewhat self-aware. We also have to know, like, what is our problem-solving approach? Like, personality-wise, how do we handle things, right? Some of us want to get consensus, and that's how we can't move forward. We can't feel good about solving a problem unless everybody is on the same page. Others of us like just problem solve, like check, 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 check. Okay, do we got it? We got it. We got it. We got it. We move forward with it. Some of us really innovate. Some of us really adapt. And so the KAI is a really easy assessment that you can do that can give you some real insight as to why some people, they really need a schedule and they really need to know the plan before they ever start, where others of us just like, okay, we're going to go here. And if we run into another problem, no problem, we've got a way to fix it too, right? And we're just going to get going, get going, get going, get going. Other people, before we take any action, we have to know the steps, right? And especially for those people, early planning, if you're really on the adaptive end of things, early planning is really important and key. And so this could be something for you to really think about and look into to help you be more self-aware of what your natural problem solving approach is. And then what do you do when you're not completely in control? And those are things too that like your own self-awareness. If you are not, for example, I don't know if any of you guys are interested or ever do anything with the Enneagram, but I'm an Enneagram 8. I am a challenger, okay? And so when there is someone, it's an intense situation, I know that I challenge everything. You know what? And sometimes when I'm not the boss, I'm not in control, that challenging can really get in the way of moving forward, because there's times that I just want to ask questions, right? I want to see if they know what it is that they're talking about before I can follow them. But if we're in the middle of something that is emergency time wise, that's not helpful. And so I need to be self-aware enough to know what information do I absolutely have to have in order to move forward. I don't have to know everything. I don't have to be in control of all of those things. And that's something that I have to be self-aware about. Others of us, this is not me, but it is something that I also know that there are some people who are going to say, I don't ever want to have to be that person that makes that decision. And so, for example, you might have a secretary who is an incredible secretary, does an absolutely awesome job, but she never wants to be, or he never wants to be in a place where they are the individual who is going to have to make a call on whatever it is. Are they the person that calls 911? No, they want someone to tell them because they don't want to step out of place. Like they are very, very good at having a checklist and doing exactly what it is, but they do not want to be that decision maker. And you have to honor that. And you have to know that if they have told you that, then you want to put in place procedures where they're not going to be that person, especially not in the situation of a crisis. Now, there may be also where you're having that conversation to say, I know you're uncomfortable with these pieces, but when this happens, this is what I need you to do. And so we're going to try to checklist out as many of those things as we can so that you're comfortable with the piece of control that I need you to have in this situation. And so those are things that, again, the more self-aware you are of your own intentions, of your own normal situations, the better you're going to be with it. Okay. So we've got to practice self-awareness. It is a practice. There's skills that you can do to continue to get better at it. And reflection is key. And we're going to keep coming back to reflection. So the next thing that the authors say in Your It is really also looking at, is definitely looking at the complexity of situations. And so we've all maybe either done these knots, or back when we could actually, like hold hands and be within 6 feet of one another, we did human knots. And there's always those complexity of those situations, right? We do those team building activities to really build that trust, and also to see how different people react to that, right? And so really, we have to think about anytime a situation comes up, there's rarely ever a single answer, right? And there's not ever rarely is there this clear path. And this is one of the things that I think that the pandemic has really highlighted, I guess, where there's some people that are like, this is what, fill in the blank, CDC, local health department, school board, like whoever it is, that local hospitals, like whoever it is that makes your decisions for your organization, you're like, well, this is what they said, and so this is exactly what's happening. But really, there's just, even with that pandemic, there's so many other things that play a role in it. And so as programs, we've done everything we can to try to adapt, to try to innovate, to try to move through these situations, right? But the situations are just complex. And so part of what we have to do as leaders is we really have to kind of try to hone in as much as we can, but also understanding that complex situations they're hard, they're not an easy, they're not I can look this up in a book and here's exactly what I need. Even though we're going to strive to do some of those things to take out some of that uncertainty, our goal is going to be to answer the questions about what can we gain, what can we learn about the complexity of this situation. So we really want to know what is truly happening. There's times that it's almost comical to sit and listen to the radio chatter when the buses are out and people are going back and forth. And unfortunately, it gets a ton worse whenever our program is not occurring on a certain night, right? Because we have kids who aren't riding a bus, or they don't know where they normally go, or on this day, Wednesday they go to the church, but on this day this is a no leap day, and so they go here, and all of these different things that are going on. And so much of the time other people try to help, but sometimes it's not always helpful. Like, that just makes the situation even more complex. And sometimes the bus driver has a name, but it wasn't the right name with the right kid of what they're talking about, right? Or it's the wrong, they're talking about Andy, but it's the wrong Andy. And so really trying to figure out as a leader what is truly happening in the situation. That's the first thing we really want to try to do. And then we have to also look at who is involved. And some of the time these are things of like, by eliminating people who don't need to be involved. This again is something that if you have these conversations before a crisis occurs, you know who is supposed to be doing what when. And that can be very, very helpful. The other piece is also identifying, and I'm going to talk throughout this time, we had a bus incident that I don't even want to say was a bus incident. We had a bus that was stopped getting ready to let kids out, and we had a pickup truck behind that just tapped rear-ended, literally took the dust off the back of the bus. Okay. But it was treated like an actual bus accident. And so those are things that, like, as we look through, when we think about those things, one of the other pieces that we have to say is like, don't involve yourself if you're not involved in the incident. So having additional people on the radio are not helpful. Having a neighbor who said, I just saw a truck hit a bus, call in to 911, that's not always helpful with some of those things, right? And so we are striving to get as much information as we can to know and to tell people what's going on. And then again, it's not likely a simple solution. Rarely can we find, like, here's the guide for program directors and site coordinators if, fill in the blank happens, whatever it is, in case of a tornado touching down in your area. This is what you should do. This is what you should do if you have an irate parent, right? And so just to kind of think about that complexity of situations and to really think about the perspective that we each bring to each of these issues, we're going to do a little game. Now, I know that you guys are sitting probably looking at your computer. I'm here talking to my computer, and it's super great time, right? But we're going to pretend like we're right here together. And so what I would ask you to do is we're going to figure out what's inside the cube. And so I'm going to give you guys a couple of different pictures that I want you to look at so that we can see, what are you seeing when you look inside this proverbial cube? And if we are really in person, then we would be able to look into it, but we can't. So we're going to do that. So what I want you to do is, if your first name starts with A through M, I want you to keep your eyes open. Okay. Therefore, if your name starts with N through Z, I want you to go ahead and close your eyes. I know you're sitting at your computer and you're like, Colleen, I'm not doing this. Play along. It'll be good. I promise. Okay. So N through Z, close your eyes. Got your eyes closed? Okay. Thanks for playing along. This is going to be so much better. So what we're going to do in just a second, N through Z, you're going to keep your eyes closed. A through M, your eyes are open, and I'm going to ask you what you see. Please don't say it out loud. I want you to look at the picture only. Don't say it out loud. Okay, A through M, eyes are open. N through Z, eyes are closed. Okay, so A through M, what do you see? You were looking through peephole A. What do you see? N through Z, keep your eyes closed. Okay, everybody got that? All right. Okay, now I need we're going to switch A through M. Keep your eyes, go ahead and close your eyes. First name, A through M, close your eyes. Come on, guys. All right, here we go. Okay, so now we have N through Z. Your eyes are open. I want you to go ahead and open your eyes. Okay, you're looking through peephole B of the same cube. And I want you to look and tell me, what do you see inside that peephole? Okay, you got it? All right, okay, so everybody's opened their eyes. All right, and then on the count of 3, we are going to go ahead and we're going to say, what did you see inside of the cube? All right, ready? 1, 2, 3, circle. Wait, what? No, I said circle. Some of you said triangle. Wait, let's try this again. Okay, ready? On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3, triangle. Wait, what? Okay, I don't know if we got this. Maybe I lost something over the Zoom connection. Part of you are saying triangle. Part of you are saying circle. This can't be. You both looked in. Yes, one was looking in peephole A, but one was looking in peephole B, but you were looking inside the same cube. How can you have seen 2 different things? A triangle and a circle are very different. I mean, come on. A lot of us work with preschool kids. They could tell us the difference. Maybe I need to call up one of my students and have them look in this cube to help us out with this perspective issue. Complex situations. We're looking in the same cube, and yet 2 groups of people who are intelligent people, right? You know the difference between a circle and a triangle. So why are we having this issue? it's all about perspective. And when we each bring our own perspective, we have all of these different lenses that we are bringing to the issue. Some are from our past, some are from our current, some are from training, some are from our childhood, right? Some are from our local community perspective. Some of them are from our larger school board. Some of them are from our college experience. Some of them are from our child care and in the time that we spent with kids and parents, right? We have all of these perspectives that play into how we view the issue. And so when we look at it, some of you saw people A and you saw a triangle, which was absolutely correct. Some of you saw people B and you saw a circle, which is absolutely correct. When we look inside the cube, you're both right, right? For your perspective, you are 100% right. I listen to Dave Ramsey a lot, and he has a new personality that's come out at exactly the right time when we absolutely needed it. His name is Dr. John Deloney. And one of the things that he talks about, he's a counselor. He talks a lot. He just wrote a great new book about anxiety, and I can't wait to I haven't read the book yet, but I just listened to him speak on it, and it's a short read on things that we believe about ourselves sometimes, especially with anxiety and thinking about that. And his perspective, what he talks about is there's a lot of times we have to choose being right or choosing the relationship. So we can prove that we are right in that we acted in the most, the best moral condition or whatever it is you want to say, but we're going to lose the relationship in the process. And I think that's something we have to absolutely keep in mind when we're talking about perspectives of these issues, because what your truth is for your situation at that time is not necessarily the same perspective that I'm seeing right now in my location at my time. And instead of judging all of these things, we have to realize that we're living in a complex world with complex situations. And even if we're talking about our program, then we have all these people's lives that also feed into those same things, right? And it's just complexity upon complexity. And so instead of just saying like, this is my perspective, this is my truth, we have to be willing to go over to the other people and really see and understand. And I think that's one of the most incredible parts of after school is the learning that takes place, not only for our kids, but for our people as well. Because if we are truly going to be leaders that we want to be, we have to continually push past our own perspective. And if we're going to be leaders that are ready for whatever it is that may happen, whatever crisis may come up, we absolutely have to do this before the time. Because otherwise we're stuck with only ever seeing a triangle or only ever seeing a circle. And in the end, we can't ever see the full picture, right? Because we're not willing to get outside of our own perspective. And so that's just something that we absolutely have to think about. And it becomes every level of leadership that we go up, it becomes more and more important to do that. I love George S. Patton. I taught high school agriculture for 8 years, and one of the posters that I had on my wall was, if everybody's thinking alike, then someone isn't thinking, also from Patton. And it's one of those things that when we think about this and we think about actually going into the crisis, okay, so we've gone to the basement and we're coming back up and we are ready to plan. We understand that perspective. We have to think about different perspectives. We understand that situations are complex and there's things that we have to think about. Okay. One of the things that my superintendent, Matt Davis, we had I think you heard it during a crisis or a school preparation for issues that may come up at a school, but he says a lot, our bodies are never going to go where our mind has never gone. And so your body's not naturally going to react to something if you haven't trained it. And just like Patton, like we can't let the fatigue, we can't let the, sometimes physical pain, like whatever it is, there has to be times that we have to train our mind in order to train our body, to train those responses. I have to, in my mind, know that there is nothing that's going to hurt me in a bathroom, right? That fear, that heightened, the chest tightens, the pulse races, the sweating starts, right? And I'm trapped is what I feel like. I have to tell myself that, to tell my body to respond in a proper way, right? We have to be able to do those things. Some of the time we need professional help with those things for sure. And we're going to talk a little bit about that here as we move through, but really thinking about how can you plan. I really like this crisis intervention model I found this online, but the 7-stage crisis intervention model to help you think through those different pieces that are there. Okay. And I think one of the keys in how we plan, and one of the things that really helped us as an administrative team for our district, is that we had been working on that building trust for quite some time, right? When the pandemic occurred and we knew that our school was going to close and we had to figure out what are we going to do for virtual learning? What are we going to do for kids who, that eat at our program and they get 14 of their 15 meals a day in our school system? What's going to happen there? It was one of those things that I had no issues working with my other administrators because we had worked for a long time building trust, right? Getting to know one another, having those things already in place. You don't always get that option because of the way crises happen. But at the same time, we can plan and intentionally take advantage of some of those things. So when we really think about this, how can you plan and what kind of crisis might you encounter? So we really think about that. In my mind, it kind of goes through three kind of categories, so to speak. And the first one's going to be natural disasters. I know in our area, that's mostly going to be tornadoes. It's going to be ice. It's going to be fire. And I wouldn't have normally thought about ice storms or major snow incidences. But I don't know if you guys recall a couple of years ago when a front came across and there were people in St. Louis who spent days at their school with students, or at least a day overnight. My sister was one that, she was there until 10:30. It took parents till 10:30 to get picked up, and then it took her an hour. She normally is at the tops of 15-minute, hitting every red light 15 minutes from her school to her house. And it took her almost an hour and 15 minutes to get home that evening because of the snow. And we had one of those as well that was an ice storm. It was like freezing fog that came in, and we had to say, okay, parents, we need you here. Buses are leaving at 5. We're going to go ahead and feed the kids and, go through and look at some of those things. And part of that was looking at, do you know what to do in these responses? We do drills, right, to prepare the kids, but do your adults really know how to respond when those things occur? And those are pieces that we want to try to plan as many uncertainties away as we can so that we know, what's going to happen as we move forward. Human threats, things like school safety. So we're going to talk in just a bit about school shootings and what can we learn from things that have happened, because that's absolutely a horrible thing, and that would be kind of an extreme situation. But we want to make sure that we address those. And do you do safety talks every year? Do you reiterate with staff members what you're going to do depending on where you're at? And with ours, we come to with our program, our different buildings all come together to eat dinner in one location and then leave from there. And so we have multiple different conversations about where are we at and when could things happen? Do you know what you're supposed to do as the adult? And have you thought through what your plan would be if you were on the preschool playground compared to the, maroon playground or whatever it is? And so thinking through those things. And then also things that are not necessarily like, we don't always go through, like, again, there's not a course that I took in college or, that I could probably find on the Mason website that tells me when custody battles occur, this is exactly what you should do, right? But we have those things and they can be extreme, and we can have people who are extremely irate and uncertain about what their behavior is going to be. And then other human threats are parents that just don't show up, right? And those are things that you may not think about. Well, that's not a crisis, I can handle that, but it can become one. And so there's times that it's just like, do you know how to act? Do you know what your steps are? What is it you're going to do? And then I just threw out other, because there's some things that you do that are just other things that may occur. And so they would be things, in my opinion, that's like a bus accident or a student health emergency. We had a tornado in our town. We have had different times that we've talked about fire preparedness a lot within our program. And then most of the rest of these things I've dealt with, unfortunately I've had to go through, and so that experience can be beneficial if I use it, right? If I learn from it, if I help my staff learn from it. And so that's kind of the rest of what we're going to spend our time on today. And so for whom are you planning? That is a great question. And so it's one of those things that when we think about, we want to go through and we want to automate as many things as we can, okay? We want to have those conversations so that when that phone rings and there's multiple different things that could be happening on the other end of it, we're as ready as we can be, okay? And so locally and recently, I was home sick on the couch when we had that bus incident. And so I'm getting a phone call and they're like, yeah, we had a bus accident. I'm like, okay, what happened? Who was the driver? And even though I did not feel well, I just went right into that mode. I'm not going to tell you that I would have necessarily done that same thing here, but I was like, okay, this is what you're going to tell 911. If it's not a medical emergency, like we went right into the things. But I was also feeling bad because I was like, have we talked about that with my site coordinator? So we gone back through things. Was my secretary as prepared as she could be? And so this really motivated me to, in this like non-emergency, right? It was an incident where the ambulance were still going to come and the police were still going to be there and there was still going to be a report. All of those things were going to happen. Parents were going to be called, kids were going to be picked up, all of those pieces. And it allowed us to address a situation. About 10 years ago, a local school district here had a major bus accident. Kids went to multiple different hospitals. They had kids life flighted different directions. And it was by all considerations like a mess. They were coming home from a sporting event where, you have kids signed out. I don't know where there wasn't really like an adult in charge. I don't know if the adult was hurt. I don't know all of the details of it, but I do know that we've used that incident as a guiding point to look back on to see how many of these different things can we address so that those same kind of things wouldn't happen to us. Now, are you going to be able to plan every single thing that will happen in a crisis? No, but again, your body's not going to do what your mind has never thought about. And so again, as many things as you can automate for people, the better off you're going to be. And so who are we really planning for? Thinking about really like checklist. And so administrators for your program or for like what would become, a command center if you needed that. And so this would be the people that, parents are going to want to call. They're going to want to know what's going on because excuse me, I don't know about you guys, but I think before we'd even made the 911 call, someone had posted on Facebook that there was a bus incident and not, don't go on Walnut Street, whatever. And you're like, seriously, again, not a helpful thing to do for future reference. But if you're really concerned, then you should call into the local authorities and your call center for your 911. But checklists, so administrators. So basically all the people that are on here, administrators, office staff, other staff who are with students, staying with students or that were involved in a situation with students, you want them to all know what their role is, but then you also want to let them know what other people are going to be doing. And so it's one of those things of like, I don't want my office staff to worry about heading to the scene, right? That's not going to necessarily ever be what I'm going to ask that person to do unless it was super crazy. Okay. But our goal is always going to be, we're going to have me as a program director, I'm going to call my superintendent. We're going to have a site coordinator on site potentially, depending on the age of the students. We may call our transportation director if it's a bus incident. Okay. And so we're going to talk through what do those things look like and then try to prepare as many different things as we can for those people. The other thing that this bus incident helped us to kind of identify and look at was proactive communication with our local emergency agencies. So there was some confusion on when our board policy says that ambulances come and an ambulance comes and checks out students. Okay. When the EMTs got there, they're like, there are no patients, like no one is hurt. There's no victim, whatever word you want to use. They did not have a medical need to be there. And so they were pretty much done. But then there was some confusion on, can the kids go with the school personnel or do they have to wait for parents? And one of our parents was frontline staff at a hospital. And so we know she doesn't get home until 7:30. The kids were a block from their house. They would have been getting off the bus and old enough to stay home until mom got home an hour or so later. And so that was their normal plan. But it was like, can you guys sign them out? And like, yeah, they're our responsibility. But again, I wasn't there. And so it was hard because it was like, I'd put some site coordinators in a position that they'd never been in. Now we all learned from it. And again, it was very positive because then after this all occurred, we met together as an administrative team and we met with EMTs, we met with our local police department, we met with our emergency management, fire chief, and we had that conversation about what are the different roles and who plays what role, and really looking at, for our benefit as a school district, we need to have some sort of information from the EMTs that they have checked out the students and that these students and listing their names, did not have any visible or did not voice any injury or concern. And so that was something that was really important because we'd never had that conversation. We didn't have that out there anywhere. And then we had the other conversation, with the kind of who takes control, who's in charge on that scene, and spoke down through that. And then from that, we also looked at some checklist of like, what do I need my office staff to communicate to, 911? And if in our county, if we dial 911, it's going actually to the sheriff's department, which is a little bit away, because one of the things I said was, how do they not know where 4th and Walnut is? Like, come on, we're not that big of a town. but it was going to the county level. It wasn't locally within Eldon. So we didn't call the Eldon Command Center. We didn't call the or Eldon Dispatch. And so those were things of, and they need a 911 emergency address, an actual 911. They didn't need just the intersection of two streets. Ambulances dispatched to a 911 address. And so those were things that we learned through this proactive communication. And so if you've never done that as a program, definitely have that conversation. If you're within a school system, have that conversation with that principal or with that superintendent, with somebody in the central office. Have that conversation, even if it's just your after school program, having those conversations about what happens after school, because there have been times when, a student didn't get off the bus, or one parent said they were being picked up and one parent said they were riding the bus. And then when the bus doesn't go, instead of contacting you, the parent immediately goes to the police department and wants to, make a missing child report. And you're like, no, they've safely been here, which is what the instructions were from per mom, and dad didn't know what was going on or whatever it was. And so we've had those conversations enough now that they know, like, if it's after 4:00, this is the number I'm calling. This is who we're going to contact. And so it's really key to have those conversations early on so you can learn about those different pieces. And then again, what do we want each person to know? What their responsibility is. And this was really a good conversation to have about, like, with our bus drivers. And so if there's a bus incident, because different, depending on where they'd gotten the information, I mean, they were doing everything, right? And I drive a bus. And so I've driven a bus. I've had times when there's been some issues that have arisen. And so I have that perspective as well about, like, my only job is going to keep those kids safe, right? As safe and as calm as it can be, and provide information so that they can get us the help that we need as quickly as they can get there. But if they're asking me to do umpteen other things and make seating charts and all this stuff, and it's actually an emergency, that's going to be really difficult to do. And I said, and it's something that, again, proactively, we want to have those things so that it's just a check mark of the kids who are on the bus and they're always sitting in that same seat. And we know where they're at. And that's something that every driver has, exactly the kids who are on the bus each evening. And that's just a piece of it that we do to make sure we know where they're at. But we wanted to make sure that that bus driver knows, hey, your job is really to take care of the kids while you're there. Take care of the kids. That's what we want you to do. Provide us enough information and then take care of the kids. And it's the same thing with our secretaries here. We want you to get that information as quickly as you can, transmit it to those who need to know it, and then we want you to just be there to respond to parents, right? That's your role. And you're going to have this site coordinator here to help you as those parents come in, or if we need other additional information. And then the people that are on the scene, like, this is what's going to happen when we go. This is the person that's in charge. This is what, this is what your duty is, and this is what's going to happen. If we have to have kids to the hospital, we try to talk through all of those things. And it's a lot, right? It did take some time. But again, the proactivity of it helps us all to be more confident, knowing that if something were to occur, we're a whole lot better prepared than we were even at the beginning of the year. And so those are things that, even, like, you may think, well, how do we really think about, and how does this really relate to, like, things like COVID and that kind of thing? And again, the temptation is to look back and just to dwell in the hindsight, like, well, if I'd have known, whatever it was. But no matter what happens, like, you do want to reflect as a best practice, not to say, oh, well, now I know, but part of it is to say, because I've reflected, I'm going to be better tomorrow. I'm going to be better in the future with whatever challenge may be there. And that is something that we have to do, not just dwelling on, I wish I would have known, or, well, yeah, if I knew that now, I didn't know that then, right? And so you just want to make sure that reflection is the best practice to try to learn from the past. And again, not in a judgmental way, but in a, we can get better by observing it. And that's really what this book, what the book You're It does, is it takes all of these different things, from Hurricane Katrina to the swine flu coming into the country, which surprisingly, like, sounded a whole lot like COVID. Very interesting chapter for this time. But it was one of those things that, what are those best practices? Okay. And looking to the past. And then again, like, reflecting on other situations, whether it's that local bus accident that I talked about, or if we're thinking about, with school shootings in February, that's going to be the three years since the Stoneman Douglas down in Parkland, Florida. And that was one that, like, that made, every school shooting is usually something that the media clicks on. But this was one of the first times where, people really had, like, there was law enforcement that did not act in the way that a lot of people would say, this is exactly, like, this was wrong, even to the point of being prosecuted for it. And it was one of those deals where people had a major reaction to it, right? Like, how could this person who was trained, how could he let those kids die? How could they let those things happen? And really what we have to do is we have to look back on it. We have to reflect upon that whole situation and look at that. And it is an interesting case. Like if you, not saying that I mean, it was a horrible, horrible, horrible situation have happened, right? A loss of life. And anytime our schools become unsafe, it's a horrible injustice in our country. But it is one of those things that there's multiple places online where you can find, like, every minute by minute things that were happening. And some of the time you question, you say, well, why did this happen? And everything from, there were camera delays that they, weren't aware of, just different things like that just really makes you reflect on other people's situations. But I challenge you to don't do it in a judgmental way of like, this is what they did wrong. Do it in a place of, again, it's complex. Every problem is so complex. What can you learn from that situation that's going to help you to react better in the future, right? And so those are things that we have to make sure that we're looking at that, because they're complex problems and we all have our own limited perspective. And then from that, with that reflection, we can plan and we can plan and we can plan. And some people are like, oh, but you get so caught up in just like the plan. But I think you have to spend some time on this every year. We can't just, here's our procedures, and these are going to be our procedures for the next decade, right? Because we have new issues that come up. And if COVID taught us anything, it taught us that, right? Like, we have to be able to adjust. We have to adapt. We have to change when there's different expectations, when there's different knowledge, then there's different threats that come into our lives and into our programs and into the lives of our students. And so we have to just continually plan, adapt, overcome. That's what my dad says all the time, like, plan, adapt, overcome. Like, he's just like, you have to just keep moving forward with those things. And one of the key pieces that we did for this, one of the last things I kind of want to share with you before we do our reflection, is really thinking about is there a regimented way that you do after action reports? So again, I mentioned Michael Hyatt at the beginning. I found the book You Were It because of one of his recommendations. Your Best Year Ever is a really a great book to make you really think about your goals. And one of the things that he talks about is based on military actions and how do they react and what is it that they do. And this is something that in an informal way we've tried to implement during pieces of our and something I really wanted to implement full on, but we haven't had as many opportunities with like family events and that kind of thing we would normally be doing. But we've still done it with some different pieces of even the start of programming and what are some things we wanted to know. And so basically with those after action reports, they can be very formal or they can be very informal. Like, we've got a Google Doc set up so that if I wanted to, we could pull it up on a Google form that you just type in the information. And so I have that after the fact, especially if there's multiple groups. So sometimes that's different sites. Sometimes there's different like leaders at different stations. You want to know what was there. And so basically you're asking things, you really want to know like what took place, right? What was there? And we start that with questions like, what did you intend? What truly happened? And again, not for blame, but to understand multiple perspectives of different things people are seeing. Someone who was at the welcome table may have saw something completely different than someone that was at the service station, right? The station where they were doing the service project. And so the service project, they might have planned differently than the people who were doing the check-in. And so we want to see like every perspective. What did you intend and what truly happened? And then what can we learn about it? And then what should we do next time? And like those simple questions like help to really guide. And basically we really want to link what was our performance today to how can we get better for the future. So as a leader, if the team fails, it's not always because I failed, but maybe I failed to provide the preparation that the proper training that they really needed. When we're talking about like onboarding a new staff, this is something that I strive to like ask them those questions, take the time to learn from them to make that process better. We also want to look really at like key issues. And this is where like feedback from every participant is really important. And it's one of those things that some of the time, like we have to provide those pieces of information for the people who are like boots on the ground, right? So the secretary who's actually going to be like on the phone, if we don't ask for her perspective, if she's not a part of that conversation or he's not a part of that conversation, then we don't have every perspective that we need to make future training or to get that perspective for the future to make the next situation better than the past experience that we had. So after action reports is something I absolutely encourage you to do. And actually, if you go to Michael Hyatt, I should have put that website up there, but if you type in after action reports, Michael Hyatt, there's a great blog from a former military personnel, kind of how those are used. And then he has a lot of templates, a lot of guides. You can find multiple different ones of that. And then the last thing is just thinking about what do you do personally to prepare? And so this book, The Body Keeps the Score, is a tough book. Okay. It is a tough book. It is about this um, doctor has gone through and worked with all kinds of different people in different trauma. And the whole part of it is like really understanding how the brain and the mind and the body really react to trauma, and how so many of our things are really like trained into our gut. Okay. So how trauma impacts us at the like molecular level. And then also those solutions. So not just like you're stuck in that place. I'm not stuck in that outhouse as an 8-year-old, right? But I have to process that. I have to work through that. A lot of times that does, again, take professional help. And so depending on the trauma that you have faced in your past, depends on how do you best prepare for today. But this is an incredible book to really like just make you understand how all of those things are connected. And then also the second half of it is just all different kinds of treatments that are really helping people and who are facing various traumas. And what does that have to do with us today? Crisis can definitely lead us, can cause trauma in our lives. And so some things that we have to do to be the best leader, to be ready when something happens, is we have to continually practice self-care. And I know this can be hard, especially this year, like with so many different demands. We've had so many different things that have, been added to our plate, whether it be striving to keep every kid in line order and having a chart for everything, knowing where every kid is so you can contact trace if there is an issue, knowing what time did that kid get here and were they in this spot or were they in this spot, just all of these different things that have been added to our plate because of the situations. But you have to make it a priority. It has to be number one on your to-do list all the time. And it looks different at different stages in your life. It looks different in different weeks. Last week, my self-care was not the best, right? I traveled a lot. I didn't get the optimal amount of sleep that I need, but I know that. And so I planned a weekend that wasn't go, 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 go crazy, and making sure that I said no to some things on Friday so that I could be the best person I could be for the rest of the time that I needed it to be. And again, you can't be your best if you're not taking care of yourself. And this can be everything from sleep to diet to exercise to positive relationships to reflection to, all of these different things that are practices there. Um, and when you need to be able to think, you have to be able to think, right? And so if you didn't sleep last night and then today a crisis occurs and you're constantly doing this, you're not going to be at your best. So you really have to make sure that if you won't do it for yourself, do it for your kids, right? Do it for your program. Like you should do it for yourself. But if you're one of those people who guilt trip everything, you have to make sure that you are your best, because people are needing you to be the best leader. You are in a position of leadership, and that's a great calling, and you have to be there and be ready. And so in order to do the best that you can, you have to be prepared. And we already kind of talked a little bit about this, but address your own traumas now. If you know that there are things that are triggers for you, you have to work through those, because if you don't, it's going to creep up and show its ugly face, and it's going to impact you in a negative way almost every time when you least need it. Okay. It's going to be something that you're going to, it's going to cause you to act irrationally at a point in time when people are looking for you to be a leader. And so address those today. Okay. And then in the end, like you're it, but you can't be all it, right? Not every day, all the time. Like I said, when that bus incident occurred early this fall, I was homesick on the couch. Not a thing I could do about it at that point, right? I still provided direction, but really it was making me think that I have to train additional staff, and really made me, get all of those checklists ready. And it was one of those things of, if no one else uses it, I know that they're there, and we can talk through them from there. We've talked to my secretary, talked about site coordinators, what would we do in the future? And then we're going to continually have those conversations. And like I said, we proactively then met. I mean, it was reactive, but it was proactive of if something more urgent would have happened, right? We learned from this situation and we applied it to today. And that's what leaders have to continually do. That's what you're called to do, is really that you are it. You are the leader, wherever that's at. You may be a leader of a whole program. You may be the leader of a classroom, and there's kids that are looking up for you to do the right thing when times are uncertain in the middle of a crisis. And if we've trained on that, and if we've had those conversations, your staff is going to be so much more prepared. You're going to be ready. That voice inside of you is like, you got this. You're it. You got it. So finally, I just want to close with a little bit of reflection. So I want you to just take a few minutes to really think about, like, where are you at? Okay. If you're the leader of a program, have you had these conversations? Are you to that point? Do you have enough self-awareness to know? And if not, then you have to ask for some feedback, and sometimes that just sounds like, if we had a bus accident tonight If we had a substantial ice storm here in December, are we ready for that? What is our plan? What are we going to do? What does that look like? Okay. Excuse me. So where are you at? What conversations do you need to have, and who do you need to have them with? Have you had conversations with, do you have emergency contacts, an easy way to get a hold of all of your parents, in a second? Is that up to date? Is it accurate? Do multiple people have access to it? What conversations do you need to have? What information do you need to know to be prepared? Do you know who to contact? Who would be in charge in your situation? Do you have all of those numbers? That was one of the things that we knew, is that, yeah, I had all those numbers for last year, but I hadn't shared them with my new site coordinator, or I hadn't updated them to when those things had changed. So what information do we need? What do you need to be prepared? And then finally, what personal trauma or issues do you need to address to be the leader that you really hope to be? If we don't address those things in our personal life, they're just going to continue to hold us back. And please hear me when I say this, that there's some things that you can talk through with a friend. There's some things that you can read about. There's some things you can journal and you can move past. But there's a lot of things that we can't. There's a lot of things that, especially in the day that we're living in, that we may need additional help. And there is never any shame, never anything that should hold you back from getting professional counseling if that's something that you need. So the thing that we have to have, what we need you to do as a leader, is to reach out. Because so much of the time, by taking control of our own personal issues and traumas, that's when we really truly are the leader that we want to be, and that we can really rise above. So I just want to say thank you guys for sticking with me on this. And if there's ever anything that I can do to help out, that's my email address here at Eldon. That's my cell number. I do some consulting. I do some blogging on the side. My blog's probably way behind right now because I was on a writing challenge in March. So there was a lot of uncertainty in that for sure. But I need to get back to it because it's good reflection for me as well. And so just remember, I love this quote. What step are you going to take today? I'm not asking you to go 1,000 miles, but I'm asking you to figure out, what's my step, and how do I want to be? What do I want to be? I'm the leader. I'm it. And so what do I need to do today to keep me moving on that journey? So thank you, Mozak. Thank you guys so much. Thank you so much for the job you're doing today during this pandemic, and just each and every day for your kids, for your parents, for your school, for your community, and just the difference that you're making positively to just make this world a place we all want it to be, which is better. So thanks again. Have a great day.